Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilshire today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
Hey, buddy, I'm here, man. Like Taco Bell was late with my order. That in turn made me late getting back here. And therefore, we are a few minutes late coming out to you guys. And guys, I blame Taco Bell.
Wow, I would never blame Taco Bell, but
Sweet
I can't
burger.
imagine them ever doing me wrong. That's
I
that's
forgive them. Don't get me
yeah,
wrong, but I blame them as well.
fair enough. Fair enough. Well, we got plenty to talk about today, folks, and of course, it's a live show. This is the online part. This part ain't going out with radio, y'all. You can leave your comments if you want to redirect our show. Gets to change topics. That's fine. We're open to that.
We
We
are.
love the feedback. We love the communication. But the plan is to talk about the debt ceiling stuff, the Victims of Communism Day, New York State budget, and
Ooh.
the writer's strike coming up.
Speaking of the victims of communism, the New York State budget. I think that's
Yes,
how we should
speaking of,
play
exactly.
that. that's
Victims of
that's my
Communism and New York State budget. Those are possibly related topics.
thought.
And so we got plenty to talk about there. Also, Tim, I realize I haven't posted our podcast from 2 weeks ago. So if you guys follow our podcast and you haven't heard Tim's rant on gold in New York State, that's the one that's missing. So I'm gonna get to that. I've had the last couple of weeks. I've been like cutting it close with my podcast editing. I edited the radio show in like 15 minutes on Thursday morning before I had to drive down to Ithaca.
All right, that's look that guys. Having done the podcast editing and the radio show editing, that's an enormous feat, Kevin, and you deserve a round of applause.
Yeah,
And MK
but
Ultra.
yeah, and then Ultra. Yeah, it's well. Hopefully, I ran out of beer, but my wife's going to Target right now, and she's like, "Oh, maybe I'll get you some." I was like, "All right, cool. Just
Uh,
bring it on the show. Don't even worry about interrupting me. We
we,
just
we
we'll
the
see.
show
We'll
is
see if she does." But
whiskey.
so yeah, so we'll get to all that stuff in just a few minutes. But again, leave your comments if there's something you want to add to this, and yeah, we'll get started in just a minute. We'll get started at 3 minutes. Tim.
Sounds good.
Oh, I almost clicked the wrong button. No. Give us some. I should have vamped for a few more seconds. So I should have done. I'm gonna have to cut all this out in the podcast. Sorry, online audience. You can see the ugly stuff sometimes. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Now, an hour of clarity for exhausted people of our nation mired in toxic partisanship. Left versus right, us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I am here, Kevin. I'm here.
Yep.
Barely.
So happy Thursday, folks, or Tuesday if you're listening online. Thank you for joining us here on WYSL or on the Free Solution Facebook page, YouTube channel, the Kevin Wilson pages, the Tim O'Connor pages, wherever you're listening and or watching today. Thank you for being here. Got plenty of stuff to talk about. We're going to talk about the debt ceiling stuff that's starting to come up less than a month until our country is destroyed, if I'm
We're
to
broke.
believe the headlines.
We're broke.
Yeah, we were already broke.
We're broke. We're broke-er, and we're gonna run out of cash, Kevin.
This is just whether or not the Treasury has permission to spend the cash that we have already spent.
It's just servicing the debt, Kevin. Do you know how important that is to the people that we owe money to, and you know everybody. Like this is probably the 170th time I've been through this debt ceiling argument where one side is arguing for a slightly lower expenditure rate than the other side, and the verbiage that they use is like, this is going to be the end of the world, And look, man, honestly, one of the things that I still have a grudge against Trump for was this one of the debt ceiling battles, and he just simply put on a great show and then just caved, just
No,
absolutely
they just kind
freaking
of,
caved.
yeah, they waived it. They didn't get serious at all about the debt. Like, and you've certainly been around long enough. You said you've been around for 170 of these. Like,
It
you
seems
knew
like
what was going to happen.
like,
This happens every time. Barack Obama was a debt hawk for a little bit.
ooh,
There's once upon a time, folks, Barack Obama talked about how irresponsible it would be to raise the debt ceiling without getting our fiscal house in order. And
it's hilarious.
and then a few years later, he became president, and the bailouts happened, and then the Tea Party stuff happened, and everyone flipped sides. And then the Republicans were a party that wanted to cut spending, and then they got the majority, and then they won the presidency, and then everyone forgot about it, and everyone flipped sides. And
It's
now the Joe Biden's the president, and everyone sort of flip sides. Now, and again, when we say flip sides, to reinforce your point, Tim, it's what the Republicans are proposing right now is basically that discretionary spending, so not all the total spending, but discretionary spending would be capped at 1% growth per year. So it would still be growing, just at a somewhat, well, a slowed rate, and that they would go
that's
back to 2022 funding levels. So not
that's
that just before, like, the craziest COVID bailout stuff,
Kevin.
just before that.
That's I just want to point out that that's way slower than the rate of devaluation going on in our society
Yeah,
right now. There's no way that they can keep up with, other than baseline budgeting, which actually is like a
right.
whole nother issue. There's no way they can keep up with inflation with a simple 1% increase in discretionary spending. It needs to
Well,
be.
that would be in effect an actual cut then, which I am in favor of. Like, to me, like, that's the moderate position. Like, I'm a libertarian. Like, yeah, like, we're only gonna grow 1%. Sounds weak to me. Like, sounds like you could go further, but like, politically, that's not possible, and I concede to that. But like, the way Democrats have framed that even is that, like, it would be a total fiscal disaster that we cannot recover from, and it's not worth compromising to that end, like we have done in the past, like where we had somewhat, albeit temporary, cuts, somewhat substantial, albeit temporary cuts to like military spending, and other spending in relation to some of the earlier debt ceiling situations.
The rhetoric that they drag out, whomever is in favor of increasing the debt ceiling will drag out rhetoric of, we're going to kill our troops and we're going to starve servicemen, and like your stoplights are going to stop working, and like it's going to be utter chaos. Like government will cease to exist. And the other one that they always trot out, and even though they've changed all the laws, right? Like old people aren't going to get their social security checks, and it's like, I can you
No, they
guys?
still are.
They
That's
are, they are,
yeah,
and can you guys just stop? Because honest to God, like I remember the last Trump actually did for about 2 days, like I don't know, not cave on some sort of spending bill, and my stoplights still work. People were still getting tickets from the local sheriff's department. I don't know what was supposed to be different. You know what I mean? I don't know.
yeah. No, and now, so let's talk about like what's actually like has happened and what could happen, right? So the whole debt ceiling thing, what it is it's an artificially imposed limit on, like, money that gets issued by Treasury, right? Like, and so
Right.
like Treasury is its own thing, but it still derives some of its power from Congress, who the power of actually spending the money and the saying that you're going to spend the money are two separate things. So like that's a kind of funny thing about the whole debt ceiling debate. So like Congress has already said we want to spend this money and have told agencies to spend this money. And Treasury says, okay, do we have permission to actually do this when like we need to put this money out? And that's what the debt ceiling is the debt ceiling says artificially, like, no, you no longer have permission to put this money out.
Uh, right. And so it's like bread and circuses, it's like entertainment value, and it's
Yeah.
like gotcha politics all rolled into one. And it's like I said, this is I gotta say the 170th time I've been through it. There's literally nothing new here. It's just like
Yeah. No, it's been a bunch of, I think it's worth going over like how it actually works. Like I've seen other things like it's sort of like a limit on a credit card, but like you've already bought a subscription for something for a year.
Right.
But like in June in this case that like you're going to be maxed out, and so you need to get an extent. You need to raise the limit on that card, or like your subscription's going to lapse.
Yeah.
That's
Raise the limit on the card, or I'm going to stop paying my bill.
yeah.
That does
Um,
not work for anybody other than the U.S. government. Like,
U.S.
I
government can
cannot
do it.
strong arm my credit card company into raising my limit. Like, I can't go to them and say, "Hey, I've got a $10,000 limit, but I'm maxed out, and I've been using the money that I have on my credit line to pay the money that I to pay the debt service on the money that I've already borrowed from you guys. I need
Right.
you to increase my debt limit." And they go, wow, what we're going to do is lower your credit score, and we're not going to lower we're not going to increase your debt ceiling. Like, there's a
Yeah.
reality that the government gets to do things that everyday people just sit here and go, how in the heck did they get away with it?
Because it's
And
a
that,
state. They have special rights that we don't have. That's,
that's true.
I mean, like I'm saying it somewhat like, you know, annoyed by it, but it's
Sure.
kind of true, right? Like that everyone pretends like, oh yeah, states get special rights. Like you have this right to be able to just make up money and spend what you want, and maybe also kill people sometimes. Whatever.
I, okay, I laugh because it's absurd, right? I'm not
Yeah,
laughing because it's actually what I find to be like funny. It's hurtful to society to have this conversation framed this way. And yes, they can always just print more money,
yeah.
guys.
John
That's
on
the deal.
YouTube says they can print more.
They can, and they do,
Yeah,
and they
and
do
they
it
do.
every
Yeah,
day.
that's what it is. So, well, but I had said all this stuff about like we're just gonna stop paying our bills. Like this is what the debt ceiling says. It's money Congress already said they want to spend. They probably should have had the responsibility up front, but we're here now. So do you raise the debt ceiling? Tim, you studied, you know, uh, ec- economics,
Economics,
right? Like,
yeah.
is this a bad idea? What happens if the U.S. surpasses the debt ceiling, doesn't pay its stuff? Like, what goes on?
Oh
Is it
well,
bad?
actually, that is technically a real problem, right? Because at some point, what's going to happen is, I think it would actually cause violence at some level, right? Because some of the people that we have borrowed money from are foreign governments, and they entered into a contract under the full faith and, you know, whatever the words are, the fancy lottie
Full
lot
faith and
virtue
credit.
signaling words they
Yeah,
use to for us to pay our bills. Now, the problem is that we have no checks, no balances, no accountability for what our actual budget is and for how we're spending money. Like, so it would end up probably at violence. It would probably end up at some sort of property confiscation, some sort of fighting it out in national courts. Let's hope that's the route it would go. But
maybe.
we
Well,
owe our government owes that money to other governments who have.
Well, it's to be fair, most of it's owed to American citizens. Actually, it's owed to banks and
Well, they
to
have no
people who
power.
have
We
like
just lock them in a
stock
cage.
portfolios with T bills and like all that sort of stuff, right? Or not stock portfolio, but like a financial
Right.
assets that have like government issued bonds in there.
Right.
And so a lot of it's owed by Americans. Some of it's owned by like places like China or European countries or whatever, right? Like it's all kind of spread over. They make they purchase that for the same reason that like a lot of other people do. They figure it's probably safe, it's probably fine. The system seems to have worked so far, no matter how ridiculous the numbers get. So far, that money's still come in, right?
Right.
And it all works great up until it doesn't. And whether or not other countries decide to use violence in response to that, or if they do something else, it's hard to tell. And I don't know I would resort to violence, but what it could end up happening is that now suddenly the US is no longer reliable. Our credit rating, because there is a credit rating, there's like a Moody's credit rating. They rate countries,
Correct.
and that could go down, and suddenly a bunch of people are like, maybe I'm not going to borrow this money. Maybe they can't sell that debt anymore.
And so what it does also do, I guess, in a realistic sense, is that it causes the interest rate to go up
Yeah.
when T-bills are bought at a discount and their perceived value goes down. People start paying less for them. Now their payoff at maturity is then influenced by the price you pay that day. So basically, then everybody gets stuck with a higher interest rate. People like that's what crashed the Silicon Valley Bank, right? Is they had a substantial amount of their portfolio in T-bills, and the T-bills tanked because of the increases in interest rates, which in turn like is reflected in the price of the T-bill by the price of the T-bill going down, right? So if it's a 10-year T-bill, the price drops to match the current interest rate and slightly lower because it's then depends on transaction fees and all
Right.
this other like kind of rigmarole in a way.
Yeah.
But
So
the reality is interest rates go up for everybody. So now your 18% credit card is going to be a 24% credit card. And it creates this ripple effect.
right. So
Probably
you,
going to
you
send
have
us.
all that going on, and
Yeah.
like us individuals get hurt, that banks get hurt too. And I know you're like, oh, who cares about the banks? But like when the banks go under, sometimes people lose lots and lots of money unless the government bails them out. And the government then needs to take on more debt in some of these cases. And that debt gets more expensive because now you look at that instead of buying this, you're like, no, I'm not going to buy this at 2 or 3%. Why would I do that? Like this needs to be above the rate of inflation, and I'm worried that you might not pay it back. So like, and that's what happens when you get like junk bonds. Like you can buy bonds issued by companies that are maybe a little sketchy, and you might lose your money on them. They might just not pay it back, so you charge a bit more. That's what ends up happening, right? And it's not like it's going to happen like that overnight with the U.S. government, but that's something that can over time start to happen. Is that people are like, well, I don't totally trust this. The government, especially if the government does something like we're just going to pretend this debt doesn't exist, which some countries have done in the past. They're just like, oh, we're gonna just not pay our debt. We're just not going to do it. And then now everyone who's like, when they try to issue debt again, everyone's like, nope, that that sounds like a bad idea unless you're going to pay me a bunch of money for it
I-
to
I'm
take on
having
that
this
risk.
I'm
Go ahead.
having this weird memory when you started talking about junk bond status. I think that there was a time under the earlier Cuomo that New York State's budget rating and New York State issued bonds actually attained junk bond status. Like they got rated like B minus by Moody's or something like that. And it was like almost tanked New York State. I
Yeah.
wish I could just magically think of the right words to pull up an article about it, but I'm telling you that there was a point where New York State bonds were junk bonds. It was
Yeah.
epic.
Epic. Yeah. No, but it's a thing that can happen with governments if you're irresponsible for long enough, and the states have much less wiggle room to be irresponsible, right? They can't in the same way that the federal government can't. They can't like just issue new debt and in the same way or print a bunch of new money to deal with that. They don't have a Federal Reserve system. I mean, I've seen people propose something similar to that in New York State, so they'd have options. It's just that there's a consequence to messing with those systems and messing with the markets that exist and ought to exist for the issuance of state debt, which I'm not against. Like there, I know there's some folks who are like, no, we should never be like the state or the federal government should never be in any debt ever. I'm like, no, I don't necessarily agree with that. Like there are times when like you might need to build a new road. I know roads, but
Whoa,
well, I know
slow
roads,
down.
but where you might need to build some new asset, right? And that requires a capital expenditure, and you make the investment to do that. You issue some debt, in the same way you might take on debt to build a house sometimes, and that is the right thing to do. That is the smart thing to do because not all people can just buy a house in cash, and it's the better financial move to take out money to make that happen. That's the long term better deal. But if you do that a whole bunch, you buy way more than you can. You buy more house than you can afford. You buy more road than you can afford. You start doing things like having your annual budget expenditures go out to debt, which is what the federal government is doing, and just spending way, way, way more. Just we're talking in the trillions now than we
31
can.
trillion.
Yeah.
31 trillion. our man Justin Amash came out with a statistic, right? Like that Democrat spending is going to add $52 trillion to the national debt over the next 10 years, and the Republican plans for being slightly better fiscal managers is only going to add, guys, $47 trillion. That's a savings, guys, of $5 trillion.
Is that all?
Obviously, Republicans are financially, fiscally superior to Democrats. It's like, bro, it's a clown show. They're all doing the same thing. How do we not figure this out? I don't know, but hey, not now, third party, not now. Now is not the time. This election is too important.
Too
I
important.
love it
Yeah,
when you
that's
rub your face when I say something like, "Oh, Tim," but like, look,
I know. Every time.
look, a vote for Team Red is a vote for Mitch McConnell, as far as I'm concerned. Like, that's it. You guys are all investing in Mitch McConnell. You're empowering that guy.
That's yeah, no, it's definitely something to think about. Like that's you're getting the whole package, unfortunately, with a lot of these politicians. That's the part that stinks. You don't want that, and I know there are exceptions out there, but it particularly in Congress at that level,
Right.
just the way everything's structured. And again, Justin Match has also talked about this, is that particular system is so broken and dysfunctional that individual members of Congress have very little power to actually affect change in legislation and drive things forward for fiscal responsibility, because everything else is rigged against them being able to participate fully and have real debates and discussion and get to issues. Everything's centered around a handful of people make all the decisions. They tell you how to vote. You just worry about getting reelected. So like we can make sure Kevin McCarthy gets another term.
And coincidentally, that would actually segue us towards our next conversation about congratulations, New York State. You now have a budget in place.
Hooray. What's in it, Tim?
Well,
We no, actually, you think about that because we do have to go to break in just a minute. You can dwell on all the awesome things that New York State is going to give us. I know Tim is very excited to share all the ways in which Governor Hochul and the New York State Legislature are going to make our lives better in the next year. That's folks listening on the radio. I know you're waiting. You're so excited to hear Tim talk about how awesome the New York State budget is.
it's going to be epic.
It's gonna be great. All right, thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. We're gonna be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon.
All right, that was well done, brother. Well done. That was really good.
All
Because
right.
it is, I mean, we're talking about we get to talk about the budgeting process at both on the federal level and now how it's being reflected in New York State. And I think that wait till you guys hear. I have articles stacked up on my computer that it's just they just legislate through budgetary processes and reconciliation, and they add laws and they add social justice narratives and they take away other things. It's just like, and without, I should save it for the show because I can get passionate about this one, man. Like,
Yeah.
this drives me crazy.
Yeah. Now we'll talk about all that. I do love this Gothamist headline. Lawmakers start passing New York's $229 billion budget. Nobody's happy about it.
Nobody
It's
nicknamed
fair.
the Big Ugly. The Gothamists did a really good job. Unfortunately, they I found a couple of articles that actually organized the expenditures and changes
Mhm.
to law in New York State a little bit better than what the Gothamists did. But the Gothamist article I read, and guys, it's free. It's worth it. They're very skeptical, and it's a great breakdown, like op-ed kind of piece, like mocking this whole system. I thought.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's great. So yeah, we'll go back in a minute. We'll talk about the budget, the policies, all the stuff that's going into this, all the gifts New York's giving us. And it was real quick, some of these comments. Patricia, I hate both sides. Which I really want equally. What does that make me? I don't know, like normal.
Normal, libertarian leaning for sure. I know that Patty's like a former kind of Bernie bro, and somehow got to enjoy libertarians, enjoy Larry Sharp, and she's like a passionate like warrior for her like turf and for what's going on in her community, and she's finding it way too expensive to live in New York State, and Patricia, I hate to say this, I'm not sure that that's going to get resolved anytime soon.
But this one, we're not gonna do this like now. Maybe at the end of the show, 17th is worth the 16th Amendment debate. That maybe after the show's over, I think do that. Patricia, how dare you call me normal? Sorry, didn't mean to insult you.
No, we should apologize for that because she is normal in a lot of ways, and I don't mean that in a bad way. You are part of the intellectual elite in our society, right? Where you're seeing this shit is problematic. What they're doing is nonsense, and they're doing it all wrong. And so, that's where we're at. That's what makes you normal in mine and Kevin's world.
Yeah, that seems to make sense to me. That's I'm being skeptical of both sides. But yeah. So we'll go back in just a second and keep those comments coming. And I know there's a request a link to that article.
I got it.
Well, Tim's gonna post that. So, but we're gonna go back in 5. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, Kevin. And guys, like I was saying before the break, wonderful, wonderful news. It's only about 4 weeks late. It's only past the deadline. But guys, it's time to celebrate. We have a budget in New York State. And thanks to the three people in the room hammering out the details relentlessly, we are spending somewhere around $292 billion. One of my favorites, my first favorite one that I just want you guys aware of, all hail the Micron plant being built in central New York. Okay. In the budget, there's a carve out for $300 million. And guys, that's only part
of one over in Syracuse, right?
Huh?
The one over in Syracuse?
Yeah. But it's only part of what we've pledged, but we have officially set aside $300 million. And look, when a big business comes to our area, there's a certain issue of governments on some level should roll out the red carpet for infrastructure improvements to make that business accessible. But as is, New York State's, some of this just amounts to bribery. I remember when the news broke about Micron coming, and they were like, hey, there's going to be 50,000 new jobs in Clay, New York, and all hail our government for bribing Micron to come to New York State. And then, like, shortly after the election, Micron's like, 50,000 seems like a pretty high estimate. We may be only going to come in with 15. And then somebody is like, what you actually have planned to build, you're going to employ about 9,000 people. So, like, spare no expense to create a new generation of tax slaves in central New York. New York State has got your back, rich guys.
That's the only way you can do it. Tim, if we don't subsidize everyone, how can they survive this tax and regulatory environment? It's the only way, Tim. There's just no other way we can do this. None at all. We subsidize our friends.
We've created a disgusting anti-business environment in New York State where the only solution is more help from New York State. It's this amazing vicious cycle that like Elon Musk, guys, like
he's good at it.
We all helped buy Twitter, okay? Like he came to New York, ate their lunch, made up for some other sort of bad deal, put some people to work in a plant that the government built. Congratulations. Like
employed I feel like a tiny fraction of people who were supposed to be there before. Like, are they even running anymore? Like, I don't even know.
Honestly, like they memory hold that stuff so fast, it's not even funny. They're just like, well, we're not going to talk about what's going on out there at the former was going to be a solar panel plant or some stuff like that. Like, I honestly don't even know, but here we are. And
No.
guys, we are going to be leading the way in government subsidized microchips. I and guys, we're already buying
Hooray.
robot dogs to put the microchips in. So
Yeah.
and
I mean, like it I'm glad to see like microchip factories coming to upstate New York, Utica areas, like having a few things go in, some more subsidized than others. And like it does need to happen here, right?
sure.
And they had the whole CHIPS Act pass at the federal level, but like the whole thing that we're not like looking back and seeing about this because everyone's like, oh, we got to compete with China, and like, what if they take over Taiwan, and what happens, and like we need to onshore domestic production. Is just a lot of these companies were already doing this stuff.
Yeah.
They were going to do it anyway. You just made it more profitable for them. You took money from us and gave it to people who are going to do that stuff for the most part anyway.
And
And
look,
I know it's expensive, and I know maybe we could have a few more jobs here if just waive taxes for the next 200 years and give us a few $100 million. But
it, it's unsound economics to stand in the way of business and then to bribe particularly like businesses that you approve of to come to your locale. Like it's guys, it's a component of fascism, right? Where the government picks the winners and the government picks the losers, and the government makes them comply. And then they do some actuarial calculations of, well, if we do only have 9,000 people, they're still going to be paying X amount of property taxes, which is going to increase our likelihood of having this much revenue. And so I get frustrated and I lose track of the words that I want to say because I can't swear on the radio. So
don't do it.
that's where I'm at with that. So congratulations, the budget's passed. We got Micron. Guess what else?
What else?
We
Yeah,
have?
tell us more about it.
All right. So guys, in the New York State budget, they and look, there's this give and take to this one. All right. But certain aspects of the bail reform I was absolutely in favor of. Okay. And especially one of those things is where prosecutors who rely on conviction rates to get reelected have to provide discovery on a time frame that they can ask the court to modify, but that was a sped up time frame. So they can't hang people in limbo for who knows what kind of trumped up charges. Man, go to TikTok and see what cops come up with. And this is no offense to police officers, but I'm telling you, some of them are bad and some of them do things that are not okay. And then prosecutors do whatever they can to back that play because they need conviction rates. So discovery is where the prosecution is obligated to turn over its receipts and its evidence to the defense. That is gone. There's no discovery reform.
No, I think they ended up canning that. They ended up putting aside the discovery reform. So it's
so that's still in there. Am I misunderstanding?
The last thing that I saw, unless that changed, but like I'm looking at a City and State article right now saying that the discovery reform, they were going to throw that out. They were going to throw out the reforms they made in 2019. And then that ended up doing that. But some of the other stuff related to bail reform is going to be changed. We sort of talked about that. It's the judges no longer have to impose the least restrictive pre-trial conditions for bail eligible offenses. So if you commit a crime that is bail eligible, they no longer have to give you like the least restrictive incentive to go back to court, right? So it doesn't have to be an appearance ticket or a low bail or whatever, right?
Right.
They can have a little bit more discretion in what they think is appropriate before you go to a trial to determine if you are guilty or innocent. This might result in some cases where like there's some folks who are maybe appropriately put on more restrictions because they have repeatedly acted in violent manners, or it could result in judges being overtly strict to someone that they find suspicious who may not even actually have committed a crime, and they get restrictive pretrial conditions that make it harder for them to work, to see their family, to engage in everyday life before they're actually convicted of a crime. And so that's what people worry about. So we're gonna see where that goes. Like I sort of get this one because of what I had mentioned before, but also like there's a lot of ways it can go wrong.
Yeah. So my impassioned rant, which was not planned, was actually inaccurate. So what do I have to issue an apology for that? What do I do there? How do I handle that? We
Just
just keep the show going.
yeah, you just keep showing. We discussed it. We mentioned it. It's fine.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
know,
All right. So they kept it in. Thank God. All right. So I'm happy about that
yeah.
in a
Like,
way.
but like there was talk like as early as late as yesterday of like, oh, maybe this is gonna go, and
Okay.
because we didn't know like anything, and we still don't fully know everything because like it isn't exactly a open process. They're not openly debating, on the floor of the state legislature, the things that go into this bill and offering amendments and do it. No, it's three people in a room. That's what
God
it
forbid
is.
they do their freaking jobs. God forbid they force some sort of legislative action that forces the government to take that back into the hands of the legislature where it belongs. Okay. Like, God forbid. Um, Good news, rural New York, more funding for the MTA.
Oh, thank goodness. I was just thinking about that. How is that going to improve my life here in Rochester? Having the MTA better funded.
It's,
Thank
I
you.
mean, first of all, guys, like they arguably some of the things, and again, like I get caught in this deal, like we need to be kind to people and stuff like that. And look, they want to freeze subway fares in something that's already hemorrhaging $8 billion a year. They're going to freeze subway fares so that basically they won't be able to afford the maintenance that they already can't afford, and they're going to exacerbate a bad situation, right? So that will in turn require more money from New York State, apparently. They did have, I believe, they are now going to also have at least one free bus line to every borough in New York City. Which, guys, that's where I get like crossed up. Like, okay, if you're going to be running buses, like, and we're already wasting money, it's a kindness to not charge people to ride on the bus, but it still is a legitimate expense, and it's going to cause
Right.
legitimate,
So, so
cost.
it's got to be paid for somehow, right?
Right.
And like I think a lot of people like understand the sympathy that you have to like, hey, like, yeah, we want to help people be able to get around, right? And we see all the
Hmm.
benefits that has, right? But like at the end of the day, someone's got to pay for it, either the people using that system or someone else, right? Like, and in this case, like us
Someone
paying for
else.
that system,
In
right?
this
Like we,
case,
we are
as
the someone
always,
else, the people who don't
someone else.
get the benefit from that in any direct way and barely even an indirect way.
Right.
So you got to pay for it. People should pay for it. I mean, it drives me nuts. All the lefties are like, "Oh yeah, it's righteous to like jump fares and like like don't pay your thing." Like, man, like, do you want to like keep that system you have going? Do you want to keep it good and functioning and like running well? Like, you like mass transit, great. I kind of like mass transit too. Like, but it's got to be paid for. Like, let's be adults. Like, because you can't force anyone to produce the material to make the trains, to make the buses. You can't force the drivers to work for free. You got to pay for it.
But that's where the left, the hardcore left, the authoritarian left, that's where they get crossed up. Is they have disconnected this concept of cost with services provided. They don't understand that those costs to keep something running are real. Okay. And again, we say that, like, I'm not sure that they actually believe that you can't force someone to give like their time, their labor, and their materials, because that's what they did in Venezuela. That's what they've done. That's what they did in Cuba. Like,
Gonna
they
force the rich to drive the buses.
right,
Elon Musk is going to drive all of our buses.
absolutely. AI maybe though, guys, like that.
I mean,
Hopefully we get
actually,
there.
yes, that would be great.
Actually,
Elon
that
Musk,
would,
please drive all of our buses.
yeah,
I
I
take
would
it back. I
love.
take everything back. Elon, like, let's make the rich drive our buses, particularly Elon Musk with autonomous driving.
Yeah,
That's
and guys, like, look, this desire for mass transit is I mean, honestly, on some level, it's government largesse, right? Like, it's unnecessary. So, like, when the MTA in New York City says, hey, we've got to have all this free stuff. Then that gets echoed throughout the state. And like, so in Otsego County, we have a bus that goes out to Worcester with one person on it or 0 people on it, but we've got to keep the trains running on time, Kevin. And that's the important thing, you know? So there, it's in a way, it's like a platitude. I could see where in a urban area, there's a different need system, and I do want to be kind to people, but the reality is if it has value, people will pay for it. If it does not have value, people are not going to pay for it. And guys, on some level, you've heard me lecture about this. On some level, the only reason that New York City has been successful and the only reason that New York City survives is because it's been able to take from everyone to support its really bad ideas. There's a certain level of, hey, we're going to steal all of your land for water. Hey, we're going to steal up your money for the MTA. It's because there's a lot of people there. It's a tyranny of democracy, Kevin. I just want to point that out.
The guy is that they're big enough to have the influence to be able to do that, even though they probably have the resources and the people to be able to pay for it themselves if they could get together.
Could imagine like if a market response to it, like instead of it being at the dictates and whims of the government, that there was a market response, that somebody was responsible for keeping it going. It would probably obviously become more effective, more efficient. And maybe guys, like literally there are too many people in New York City for it to be sustainable. Like that may be a real issue that our democratic form of government refuses to address because it can't.
I don't think that, but we don't have time to debate that in this segment of the radio show. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. We're going to be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think we. Well, New York City's not even like the biggest city in like North America.
As a discussion point, that if they're costing us more resources and they're relying on further condemnation and what's the word for eminent domain, seizures of property to maintain their lifestyle,
Well, no. See, the thing is about New York City is they're not. They're actually a net contributor to the state. The area of the state that's getting subsidies, the rural areas, actually.
It's never when we talk about that, I've read the studies, I've read the platitudes offered by economic professors that work at NYU, but I've never seen it boiled down into hard statistics where when the MTA loses $8 billion a year, not
the MTA specifically, right?
No, but it still loses money. It's a net money loser. And then to say that New York City contributes, so that money comes from the New York State coffers. The argument is that New York City contributes $6 or $10 billion to the New York State coffers. It's like it's a wash. That's without seeing it ever boiled down into a real study.
Yeah. Well, I don't have that in front of me. I'll have to find that to you and send it to you. But basically, it boils down to this, is that like New York City has the people and the resources that it needs to be able to be self-sustaining, right? Like there's a lot of capital down there. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of people contributing, paying taxes, all that stuff. So on net, because like their services are more dense, even though like they're more expensive, but they're more dense. That's why they're net contributors to New York State, as compared to like rural areas where if you want to build infrastructure out to those rural areas, you are serving fewer people and paying a lot more to serve those people because it costs more to get to them. So New York City could contribute to New York State and be a net contributor, but they are irresponsible and aren't able to govern themselves effectively. So
correct. And then too,
that's the problem.
Right. But then there was that time when Cuomo deliberately conflated federal income tax with taxation for New York State. And so all he really did was emphasize the fact that on average salaries in New York City total to be much higher than salaries in the rest of the state. And he was talking about federal income tax, and people were all saying like, look, New York City's getting robbed. And I'm like, it's not the analogy that you think that they were trying to make it out to be. I felt at the time. I don't know. Does that make sense? Maybe I'm not. I don't know if I'm hitting the mark on explaining that.
Yeah. No. I know what you mean, and like I know like why that can be strange. Like why then are we sending subsidies to them, and like does it actually work out? Like, and I get why you'd think that, right? It's just there's so many benefits to scalability and density that exists in New York, and again, just lots and lots of money that exists there because it's a port city that's grown up over the last 300 years.
Sure.
Um, it's just different from places that are less developed. And to be honest, like when the people are like, "This is why we shouldn't split New York State because we're so dependent on New York City," I'm like, no, they are so different than the rest of us that we should be separate states. Like I'm in favor of splitting New York State in
I
part
am
because
too.
of
Just
that.
and I'm at least in favor of taking the argument seriously, like really hashing these things out and trying to get to where we get a better respect and understanding for each other. Like when a guy in central upstate New York says, "Hey, the MTA looks like an absolute freaking boondoggle," and a guy in Rochester agrees, no one in New York City is necessarily going to agree with one word that we say, and
Well,
they will vote.
they think it's a mess, but they're like, but you're still gonna pay for it. You'd be a jerk if you don't pay for it. Um,
Mhm.
but no, and I'm like, no, you guys, y'all got all the money down there. Like, work it out on your own. Like, you don't need the state to do
Exactly.
it. Like, you can figure it out. You get your big boys and girls down there. Like, work it out. And
Allegedly.
I respect that, like, because like Larry's talked about this. It's like fundamentally, like, it is different living in New York. Like things like trash collection and electricity and mass transit and like cars and like all this in buildings, like it all works differently down there because of how dense it is. And like and even though like the garbage collection thing, why they leave their bags out on the street like, you know, heathens, I don't understand. But that blows my mind. But they do fundamentally like live differently down there, and that's kind of the core of my argument for like it probably should be a different state because they operate so differently. They operate with just a different perspective on a number of things compared to the rest of New York State, which is more like a Midwestern state, right? Like the rest of New
Correct.
York
Correct.
is closer to like Indiana than it is to New York City or Long Island. Um,
Absolutely. And look, I've spent extended amounts of time on Long Island. I make jokes that I dislike it, but I don't actually dislike it. It's very well organized.
Yeah,
Driving
I don't
down there,
actually I don't hate New York City either. Like I like going there. I have a lot of respect for what is built there. Just
yeah,
it's different and it should be treated differently.
we should allow
Um,
them to treat themselves the way that they want to be treated and stop allowing them to dictate. Well, actually, you know what? They don't necessarily dictate. It's that people see what they perceive New York City to be doing as valuable to being done in upstate New York, and they get
right.
this confusion going on where I don't
Right.
know,
They operate differently, right? Like
right,
there's some stuff like and I get some of the pushback like I'm very pro like housing reform stuff, but a lot of people are like if they hear that coming from New York City folks, like, what would you know about like my community in the suburbs? Like, why are you telling me to like build denser housing? You don't know us, right?
right.
And like it like to me it almost makes that argument for like removing zoning harder in part because you know it's coming from a place that seems alien to most of us. Which man, you know what we were gonna talk about, and we totally forgot, Tim. We were gonna talk about the zoning thing and down near the Ithaca area,
Oh, right, right. I
down in
didn't do
Caroline.
so. I've
Maybe
done.
maybe we'll have to do that next week or something.
Yeah, we should have a more in-depth conversation about what's going on there because, and guys, I have some people that listen to me in this area, right? Um, we have forever, for my entire life, my entire 56 years, tried to draw parallels to the Cornell Ithaca community and why isn't Oneana like that? So we make renovations, wholesale renovations to try to make Oneana more like Ithaca and the community of Caroline's just south of there, and they're like, "Hey, screw your zoning, you guys. This isn't working for us. We want businesses. We want, less rules, and we want to be able to develop things easy." To At this level of engagement, that's the knowledge that I have of it.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Well, there's, and I was down there last week, and I was just hearing more about it because I was talking with some like media folks, and they just like kind of gave us a quick rundown on it. But it's fascinating, and I saw some of the opinion pieces. It's contentious to say the
Yeah,
least.
it
But
it
anyway,
is contentious for sure.
yeah. Anyway, we should probably go back to the actual show.
We should.
at some point in time and talk about, I don't know, the rest of the budget, uh,
Yeah,
writers strike,
yeah,
all that stuff.
some more interesting stuff for sure.
Yeah. All right. So we're gonna be back in 5. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wiltz, your host for today, joined by Tim the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
And we are talking about the freedom of having a budget in New York State. We left off with a debate about, a discussion about what the MTA is and what the MTA is, and for you WYSL listeners, Kevin and I kind of went into a little bit more in depth about it in our online show. So if you guys want to join us in the future, believe me, you're more than welcome. And it was a good discussion. But
yeah, no,
guys,
make sure you follow the social media channels and check out our podcast too. If you
yeah,
want to, it's about 10-minute discussion on some of this stuff, and also whether we should split New York State and a bunch of
yeah,
other stuff.
in favor. But so look, guys, this is one where progressives and Mira, Kevin and I are probably going to come down on the same side of this one. Like, first of all, in New York State, we already have the highest rate of taxation in the country. Second of all, our property taxes are already ridiculously high. So, some progressive elected officials and advocates, of course, in New York State have been championing, just passionately saying we need to tax the wealthy. That has been kicked out of the budget. It's out. We're not going to add any more extra taxes on the wealthy in New York State. I think that probably their tax burden being the highest that it is in the country anywhere already, what we're doing is if we continue to raise taxes on them, and guys, we already lost some of our big, huge mutual fund managers and stuff like that. They've already either bilocated or moved right out of the state. It was obvious that it was coming. They were talking about transaction taxes on buying and selling stocks, and these things, these people just left. They packed it up. They're gone. But so taxing the wealthy would have the same net effect of an outflow of capital, and I think it's a bad idea. It stifles the future. What do you think? Am I just being a capitalist pig or what?
Absolutely. Why do you love the rich so much and
I
hate the
hate the rich.
working
Honestly, I
class?
hate them. They buy
Yeah,
regulations from the government. I hate them.
no, I
But
know. No, yeah, like generally you agree. Like it's what's the term? Is it Kuznets that I'm thinking of? Like basically like at a certain point, like you can get to a level of taxation that's appropriate for the rich where they're either going to like where they'll you get to one point and they'll pay it, and you start to go past that. A few people will either start to engage in more aggressive tax avoidance, or they'll just leave if they have the
right,
option, right? So like
sure.
the way that curve's described is like if you get past that point, you end up actually collecting less taxes because it's become so punitive that people are going to like leave or avoid them. And that's the situation that New York is in. And
It,
probably at least some sensible folks recognize like we've already gone beyond that point. If we do this, we may end up actually losing more because so many people will leave because of this.
we're already chasing the upper middle class out of New York State. Like
Yeah.
let's be honest. The first quarter of this year saw 10,000 people change their driver's license from New York State to Florida. That's the official total so far. Um, and so look, we already are our taxing policies, our economic outlook policies, our schooling policies. All these things are encouraging people to pick up and go. So one more tax on the wealthy. We'd only lose two rich guys. I mean, even Cuomo did that whole thing of trying to beg people to come back after his COVID lockdown stuff. I don't know if you remember that, but he's like, people have taken their businesses and left. We need them to come back. And he like hosted some sort of dinner. It was like typical like virtue signaling weirdness, but you know. So I'm happy that we are not going to burden the wealthy and chase them out of New York.
Well, fewer of them.
Few, right.
And we're not going to chase them out as aggressively.
Assets as aggressively as they were hoping to.
Yeah.
So now this is one where we have a migrant crisis in the United States, and New York State has decided to add another $1 billion or another. I mean, I don't know. It's up to like $4.3 billion that we're giving to New York City to manage the migrant crisis. Um, and Adams himself is kind of getting at wit's end with what he feels is the city's ability to provide adequate services to an influx of people um, needing services. So, okay, well, we made a mess and we're paying money to clean it up, right? I mean, that's kind of what's going on.
I
I
I
know you don't
mean,
like the way I framed it. Please
no,
go ahead.
well,
Go ahead.
my way of framing it is if we just made immigration easier from the federal level, then this wouldn't be as much of a problem. That's
It
what it
wouldn't be a
is.
crisis, right? Like
Yeah,
but
like
again,
it doesn't have to be. We chose to make it a crisis.
I
Like, but
certainly respect that. Yeah,
the
I
government
respect
has chosen to make a crisis, and it
yeah,
doesn't have to be this way. We could make things easier and simpler and clearer, and people would go to New York because like that makes sense. New York's has always been a magnet for immigrants for lots of
absolutely
reasons.
sure.
Yeah, it's always been a thing, and they've always been stressed by like large influxes of immigrants, and I don't like particularly like New York State paying for it because again, New York City has ways of dealing with this historically that have been like relatively effective, and they could probably deal with it on their own. They could. That
Well,
I'm full go. Like I know I'm bleeding into the section that we had off the radio. I'm going into full like divide New York State mode, but like
oh God, I
like
loved it. It was great. It was really good. And frankly, you were I was I know you pretty well, like, but I was a little surprised at how pro splitting the state you were. Like that was good.
yeah.
Um, and guys, again, like check it out. Kevin's pretty legit when it comes to his libertarian credentials, man. So here it is. Another one that I kind of like. It ties into our zoning issues. Um, but basically the government was all set to spend billions and billions of dollars in subsidies, billions and billions of dollars enforcing zoning changes to force communities to provide 800,000 housing units over the next decade. The housing compact would have required local municipalities to achieve new home construction targets over the next 3 years, and of course, it threatened to override local zoning laws. You've heard Kevin and I talk about that in the past. Received criticism from suburban lawmakers who don't want to go through the trouble of forming homeowners associations. They just want, to campaign on a
Yeah.
semi-bigoted zoning laws.
But they want local government tyranny. Yes.
Yeah, they want local tyrants, sure. Uh, so Kathy kind of took a shot at them. They're not ready to commit to the kind of transformative change that I proposed. Guys,
Yeah.
there is a housing crisis. The government created the housing crisis. The solution is freedom. The solution is lower taxes. And the solution is more economic opportunity in New York State. But the housing government forced housing plan didn't make it. And guys, believe it or not, like these are things that almost every one of these things should have been addressed in sessions of the legislature in New York State. I know I sound like a broken record, but
Yeah.
to
It doesn't
try to
have to be in the
slide
budget.
housing issues through on a budget reconciliation deal is literal tyranny. Okay, like
No,
it's
yeah, it's not. It's
literally tyranny.
ridiculous.
What's that?
Yeah, it's totally ridiculous. I mean, even Andrew Stewart Cousins like this is an extremely policy laden budget. Like, yeah, like it shouldn't be done that way. Like this should be like setting the priorities of things that want to be funded, not making like big sweeping policy changes. Like like because we're not even going to get to all the stuff in there because there's also stuff about like the natural gas ban and the
Yeah,
minimum wage being tied to inflation
yeah.
and like these are like big changes and like the housing thing. Like I'm like generally in favor of making it easier for individuals to be able to build housing, even if that comes from like a state
Right.
law. But that should be debated totally separately from this. Like the legislature can continue to pass laws and should take the time to debate these things that aren't tied to like funding like the operations of the state. Doesn't have to be that way.
Well, for God's sakes, it shouldn't be that way. I mean, I think
No, it
that's what
shouldn't.
we're
That's not how
fighting.
legislatures are supposed to function. And I
It's
know
it,
that's how Congress functions and now how New York State functions, but it's not supposed to be this way.
It is literally so again, guys, if our elected legislators can't debate a ban on natural gas and they try to put it through, not try, guys, guess what?
Did
Congratulations. Literally They have banned natural gas in new construction, and public renewables all have to move away from natural gas. That's in the budget. The budget. Like, what in the world is going on? We're not even going to get to some of the funny stories I have to tell if we keep going down this road.
I
My
know. Well,
gosh.
we got 5 minutes left, Tim. So a
All right.
little bit of time.
So, in one that I support, even though it came through the budgeting process, and it should be something argued out by the legislature, education funding and charter schools. Okay. There was going to be as many as 100 new charter schools, but believe me, like, the unions are not going to allow that. They I don't know, reissuing so-called zombie charters. I think that's where the charter has lapsed. Basically, 14 schools are either going to be new charter schools, or 14 charter schools are going to be able to continue operations. I'm a little bit unclear about that one, even though
And
it's
I think they're all in New York City too. So that's fine. Like I'm fine with expanding charter schools. I know, like, you get some like libertarians like, it's still state funding of schools. I'm like, well, I know.
Gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, I'd rather give people more opportunities for educational experimentation, pedagogy experimentation, and like choice.
Yeah.
That is the better, albeit moderate, alternative to just having everything go through public schools with not nearly enough accountability for spending or educational outcomes.
All right. And minimum wage getting indexed to inflation. Guys, let me just be clear. Minimum wage has never kept up with inflation. Kevin and I are going to do a show on economics. We're going to talk about how a $20 gold piece holds value and what it might buy. And then we're going to tie in, like, take it a little further. One of these days down the road, you guys should be excited for that show. Minimum wage indexing is in. So,
yeah.
Congratulations, New York. You will have the highest paid unemployed people in the entire country. Congratulations.
We are going to be leaders in advancing automation and robot technology in fast food places. Like,
it's just wonderful. So it's on to some funnier stuff, guys. First one's not really funny, okay, but a Reason article points out that, and guys, we've talked about how legalizing marijuana in New York State was like this kind of botched control op deal. And so basically, Kevin, like, they can't even cross the I's and dot the T's correctly in New York State in such a way that people who are eligible to have their record expunged for formerly serious charges dealing with marijuana possession and potential to distribute can now, they can't get their records expunged because of
they had a typo. So we'll post a link to this article about it. But long story short is that, like, because of the way they wrote the law and they referenced another section in the law erroneously, effectively people who are petitioning for relief to get their sentences either expunged or reduced based on the new penalties for marijuana. So right now, like, if you're punished for having like 5 pounds of marijuana in your home, that's now perfectly legal.
Right. People were in jail for that, though.
Yeah, people were in jail for that stuff. Yeah, like, you can't do that. Or if you had like more than that outside, the penalty is now lower. Instead of being able to have that sentence changed, reduced, expunged, etc., like that, all those folks that were supposed to be helped by the changes in marijuana law are in many cases still in limbo because of the sloppy way it was written. New York State can't do anything right. It drives me nuts. And I'm also mad about the way they're doing the marijuana laws generally. And I was thinking about this, and it's bothering me the other day, how they are making it incredibly difficult to get a license. And you have to go through New York State, and they're increasing the punishment if you try to sell marijuana now outside of the licensing system. Guys, that's how marijuana prohibition started. Like that's how it began. It's they made licenses, and then they made it really hard to get those licenses, and then they punished you really severely if you grew or sold marijuana without those licenses. We're just doing it again.
Good news, though, Kevin. We've set aside funds to make sure that we can crack down on these illegal marijuana selling operations. We're ready to, like, implement a task force for tax seizures, tax evasion, and illegal marijuana sales. Congratulations, New York State. You got the government that you voted for.
Yeah, we just rebranded the war on drugs. It's
It's
amazing.
just like, cheers, buddy.
Yep.
Like, holy cow.
All right. We're out of time though for the radio
man.
show. Thanks for listening, WYSL. If you're in the online audience, we're still going to be here. We're still going to be hanging out for a few minutes. If you listen on WYSL though, make sure you check out the podcast. We talk about extra stuff in between, like we said. But have a great night, folks. Thanks again for listening. Take care. All right.
Yeah, we got some comments out there that we should
Yeah, I
deal
know.
with. I saw one from Patty. Where'd it go? I want to put it up. Something about her Hobbit house. I'll find it.
Yeah. Hobbit houses for people named Patty.
Yeah, that's the one. There it is.
Or
I love
give me a Hobbit house.
something alliteration, a double alliteration. It's a
Yeah.
good deal. New York leads the way. Oh, we were gonna do the communism.
Victims of Communism Day. Yeah, we spent a lot of time on the New York State budget, which is probably appropriate. Like,
Yeah.
nice substantive stuff for our local radio station, WYSL.
Mhm.
On New York State stuff. I do feel bad sometimes when we talk about federal issues too much on the show. I'm like, we talk about state and local stuff. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, New York State leads the way with socialism America. Victims of Communism Day was Monday. Or if you're lefty, they celebrate May Day. They celebrate their whole commie holiday. And nope.
Right.
Yeah, you know, hey, go ahead.
My records indicate that the Victims of Communism Day is actually lines up with D-Day, November 7th. So what I'm hoping, and I was going to say this to you, is what I'm hoping is it turns out to, like, you know how every couple of weeks you go through this whole, everybody posts a picture of their son and it's like Happy Son's Day, and it happens like, I don't know, once a month. Like, I'm hoping that the Victims of Communism Day kind of does that. Like, oh, hey, communism sucks. It's Victims of Communism Day, and we do that.
It's totally celebrated on May 1st. I don't
Oh,
know. It's definitely because it's May Day. That's when the international serious tanky socialists celebrate their communism and wave the red flags and burn stuff.
okay, fair enough.
So yeah, just a day to remember that governments in the name of communism killed hundreds of millions of people.
Slaughtered.
Yeah, just
Government slaughters people. Like, that's a reality, guys. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't think that we can say it often enough and passionately enough. Like, it's a war machine, and it's kind of weirdly corrupt, man. And
Yeah.
it's sad. So I have some. I don't know where people are at on the trans issues. Okay, and look, trans people are people. Okay, I think that some people are concerned with the perception that there's some sort of government force, but I've got a guy that is taking it down. At first, we had that guy from down near the city who represents himself as a gay congressman who George Santos, who may or may not be gay. Like, if you go to TikTok, there's plenty of TikTok videos saying, like, that guy was my boyfriend, like, all of this time, and then he just broke up with me. And, you know, so anyways, we've got a guy out in Indiana that he is a white councilman in Indiana. He sparks outrage after proclaiming himself. And guys, he kind of made it official. Like, he's a lesbian woman of color who is living his life at his true self.
All right. Is he doing this for real or as a troll?
Okay. Well, when it first came out, guys, it was pretty epically like he was doing it. And then as he added some color to it and some discussion, it became apparent that he's basically mocking this some of what and maybe he's just a jerk. Like, that's totally possible. Okay. But he's kind of like, well, I guess I cover a lot of the letters. He's like, I'm a lesbian. I identify as, I believe he identifies as a Native American woman. And he still admits to being attracted to women. And I have a quote from him. It's like, after much consideration, I've decided to come out and finally feel comfortable announcing my true authentic self. It is with great relief that I announce to everyone that I identify as a woman and not just any woman, but as a woman of color as well. I guess that would make me gay, lesbian as well, since I'm attracted to women. Um, he's glad to be living his true self. All right, so he's just basically trolling. All right.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
he adds a bunch of letters.
yeah. It's
Parts of me laugh when people do stuff like this. Maybe I should apologize for me finding absurdity, humor in absurdity. But he's being absurd.
that could have been a good fake news item there, but
It would have been perfect for that. We didn't really.
I know
We didn't.
we did the fake news thing today, but no, it's only like people do that all the time. Like there's that one with like the teacher in Canada who was wearing like the giant breasts and stuff, and it turns out that person was just being a troll. But it
Absolutely.
tricked a bunch of like conservatives who were like, like this is so ridiculous, and they're really mad about it. And like, he was doing it to make a point about like what appropriate behavior is in the classroom, which is
Yeah.
I guess a discussion that can be had, and it's usually those are outlier cases. Most people aren't trying to be, obnoxious or
Right.
rude or overtly sexual or anything. They're just trying to do their thing. A few
Yeah.
people are sincerely, they're not doing it to troll people. They are doing it sincerely, but also acting inappropriate. And you get some of those edge cases where folks on the left are like afraid to be like, well, like maybe chill out like a second on that.
I do have a message about this stuff because once again we're involved in this nationwide kerfuffle because some guy said some person that identified as transgendered, who honestly may in fact have been a troll, said, "I dare you to stop me from going into a women's bathroom," and it made all of the rounds on TikTok. Everybody stitched it. And guys, look, I was a single dad, right? I had little kids that I was raising by myself that I would take to stores with me. Okay, and so this for me, sometimes my kids would have to go to the bathroom, right? And guys, like I had daughters, they had to go to the bathroom. Like I'm in charge of providing them a safe environment to go to the bathroom in. And it was incredibly simple. Like it I don't know why people are getting so upset over this, why there's pushback one way and arguing the other way. Like I just frankly it doesn't fit my brain. Like parents have to make accommodations for their kids to go to the bathroom in public all the time. And like you're not your 4-year old's not going into the bathroom by themselves. You're at 12 years old, you're waiting outside for them. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're only going to be alone for a minute and a half. And like if they're gone longer than that, you're going to yell into that room and be like, "Hey, what the heck are you doing? Get your butt out here." Because they're getting into who knows what, like
Yeah.
rearranging the toilet paper or something. They're doing something ridiculous. So like I don't understand this emotionality that society brings to bathrooms. It's like,
Just yeah, I mean it's just another cultural war issue to fight over, honestly. But yeah, because like you're right. Like as like I remember like sometimes it's like, all right, well when I was really little, I would just go into the bathroom in the women's room with my mom because like
right,
she's not gonna let me go into the men's room by myself. And most people are just going in doing their business. You
yeah,
have to make strange arrangements for your kids sometimes. And honestly, we could solve all of this if everyone wouldn't mind just making individual bathrooms everywhere. Like
okay.
problem solved. Like you
So look,
just let's just go to that.
well, look, on some level, as you probably know, there's already an individual bathroom inside of almost every bathroom in every big commercial operation. Okay, they have handicapped bathrooms with stalls. All right, like if you don't want to be in there, like in that stall with your kid, you sure as heck can be standing outside that door. Like, ain't nobody going in there to injure my kid when she has to go to the bathroom.
Right.
That's it. End of story. Like, you take care of your kids and stop overreacting to like somebody that wants to make a scene.
Yeah. And yeah, and it's again people who are trying to make a scene. And sometimes it's like they're trans people want to use the bathroom. They want to use the bathroom of their preference. You wouldn't know otherwise. Like honestly, like most of the time, like
Right.
you're not gonna know unless they announce it. And I know some people do. They make a big deal of it in the announcement. Like, okay, now everyone's uncomfortable because
Right.
you told us about your bathroom experience and you didn't need to. We didn't ask. Like just go.
Right. They're living their
And then
truth.
the conservatives who want to police that and like, we need to like make sure we check what you're packing before you go in. Like, nope, that's not. We can't do that
That's
either.
also, guys, that's not
That's
the
We're
answer.
not doing
How do
that.
you enforce a law that says no transsexuals in the like? no uh, transgender females in the male's bathroom, or vice versa. Like I
Yeah.
get,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You have to use the bathroom of the sex that is on your birth certificate type of stuff, right? Like that's
why make that
but
law?
like
It's silly.
yeah, fundamentally like unenforceable though. Like, but again, many of the times you wouldn't necessarily know. Other times there are people who are, male and identify as male but look feminine, and you're like, oh, I don't know, but like that they're gonna go there, they're gonna use the men's room, and like I don't look too closely at that. I'm not like, gosh, what are you doing in my room? Like, no, like who's
I'm there to go to the bathroom, man. I'm not looking at
just
I'm not looking at other people's
it's gonna
stuff.
take a leak. You go do whatever you want. Just don't bother me. It's fine.
I got one purpose for going in the bathroom, man. And none of it has to do with making a political statement. So I don't know. Like I feel like
Yeah.
outreach. I feel like we maybe have reached this over emotional like point in history where we start dialing it down, and everybody just kind of starts laughing together. Like that to me would be ideal.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think you tried to put I assume this is Brian's comment earlier.
Yeah.
And we'll read it out loud with the correction. National Communism Remnant State should require that all stores empty their shelves. Yeah, fair joke. I mean, like, for real though, like, there's that story of was it Gorbachev who was like incredibly impressed
Yeah.
with like the full shelves. They thought Americans were putting on a show for him. And I saw like this tweet from like a Venezuelan who like went to Miami and was like, holy crap. Like I've never seen like I can just get whatever cereal I want. Like imagine a kid just being impressed, like, oh yeah, there's cereal everywhere. Like I just have my choice. It's something that we take for granted that Venezuela, which used to be one of the most wealthy countries in like all of the Americas, excluding like the United States and Canada, but like really up there, turned all that around, ended up making it the one of the most impoverished countries in the world, one of the most inequitable countries in the world. Ironic for their goal being communism, that turns out the people in political power did just fine and everyone else suffered.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. And, and that's not even the worst case scenario. That's it's really bad there. Not the worst case scenario.
Even kill as many as the other commies.
Yeah, go look what happened to Cambodia. That's
look, for all of China's successes right now, there was a major amount of bloodshed, violence, and absolute war and devastation to get there. And look, they're still gross. Like
they are still awful in their own eyes. But the Cultural Revolution stuff was bonkers. Like you can see, like what they did, like ended up like impacting, like is like the impacting like the average age of like the entire like world. They ended up impacting so much stuff because so many people died in that process. But like all these governments who have fundamentally reshaped their country forever, trying to implement an ideology, which, if is either a very flimsy pretext for just implementing like power, or a very foolish way of bringing about the ends justify the means type of thinking, and saying like, well, it's going to be great eventually, and if we have to break a few eggs, then fine.
And the eggs they're talking about are people that just
human
want to
beings.
be left alone and live their lives.
Exactly.
We'll break those eggs.
And so yeah, no, it's something to think about. Just the United States, for all of its flaws, is still relatively free market relative to like how bad it could be. And I try to keep that in mind sometimes, despite all my criticism of New York State too. It's
sure. And
look, and we don't give them a pass in any way.
Right.
But
and they don't deserve a pass. And there is a certain quality of American exceptionalism that I think I enjoy, and we all have benefited from, despite our problems. And I think that was, we're bastardizing everything in this day and age, but I always try to take a moment and say, hey, like, who am I really arguing with? Like, because on TikTok now, it's like, that's the place to argue. Who am I really arguing with? and why are we really arguing? And a lot of times I think it's just this emotionality that people have succumbed to, that they have affiliated what they think is the power structure. They're wrong, but it's okay. Like, we're all still better off together, and we're also better off right now than we will be if we keep moving down this communistic pathway.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Nope. 100%. All right. Well, on that note, I think I'm gonna call it a night.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Thanks everyone joining us online. Appreciate y'all. Appreciate the great comments as always, and have a great night.